Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amelia Proclaims Liberty. It has been a while since I've released an episode, and I apologize for that, but here I am back again, ready to go. Today, we are going to talk about an issue that is so near and dear to my heart, that I am so passionate about, and that is the issue of abortion. There are so many things facing our nation. There are so many issues in our nation and in this world and important topics that we need to cover. But I truly believe that abortion is the issue of our time. Think about certain eras of history where you think of a certain issue. If I said 1860s America, what would you think of? You would think of slavery, and that slavery existed in this nation. You would also think about the Civil War, which was actually fought in large part because of slavery. Some states wanted to have slaves. Some states wanted to outlaw slavery. If I said 1930s and 40s Germany, what would come to your mind? The Holocaust would come to your mind, and the Nazis. So all throughout history, there have been atrocities going on in certain eras of time. Now, there were other problems that existed in the United States in the 1860s. There were other problems that existed in Europe and in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. But we think of that one major issue and problem and atrocity that was going on at that time. And there are so many issues facing our nation today. There are also so many good things going on in our nation today. But I truly believe that the issue in our nation right now is abortion. The word genocide has become a buzzword in our time. Well, there is a genocide, a literal genocide going on in our country at this moment, at this exact second. There is a genocide happening in the United States of America. But the difference is it's perfectly legal. In fact, it's even normalized and sterilized and called healthcare. But it is a genocide nonetheless. You know, so many people call themselves pro-life. But I think sometimes abortion becomes this thing in our minds that we know exists, but it seems so far away that sometimes we don't take it seriously like we need to. You know how you hear about other horrible things going on in other countries, thousands of miles away, and your heart breaks for those things, but it doesn't really affect your day-to-day life because it seems so distant and far away. Unfortunately, that's how we get a lot of times about abortion. But it is not far away from us. It is not distance. It is very real, and it is happening 30 minutes down the road from where I live. It's probably happening that close to wherever you live as well. Abortion is everywhere. Our neighbors, people that we pass in the grocery store, maybe even some of our friends are having abortions. It is real. It is everywhere in our nation, and it is time that we start taking this seriously. So I have always been pro-life. I was blessed to be raised in a Christian conservative home, and so I have always been against abortion. And it's always been a burden on my heart, but like many of you, it felt so far away and distant. But when I was a sophomore in high school, I learned about the various methods of abortion. I knew abortion existed. I knew in general what it was. It was the killing of an unborn baby in the womb, but I didn't know how it was exactly done. I didn't know the methods. And one day I learned all of the methods, which, by the way, I think is so important to do because, yes, it is so graphic and awful and horrible to hear, but we have high schoolers. We have middle schoolers. Sometimes this is horrible, but even kids in elementary school getting abortions. we need to talk about the methods more, because so many people call themselves pro-choice. And then when they hear about the brutal, graphic methods of abortion, it changes their minds because it is so awful and barbaric and violent. And so I learned about the various methods of abortion, and that broke my heart. I was disgusted. I was angered. I was sobbing. It intensified my pro-life stance. Then throughout my high school and college years, I listened to a lot of political podcasts and cultural podcasts, and a lot of those covered abortion. And again, my stance became stronger and stronger, and the burden on my heart about abortion became stronger and stronger. And then I stood in front of an abortion clinic with so many other Christians praying and worshiping with the amazing ministry Love Life. And I saw an abortion clinic for myself. I had never seen one before. I knew they existed, but I had never stood in front of one. I had never driven by one before. But I saw it, and I saw the women pulling into that parking lot, one after another, going into that place. The one specific abortion center that I was standing in front of with Love Life in Charlotte, North Carolina, is the busiest abortion center in the Southeast United States. I have literally, with my own eyes as a sidewalk counselor, in a 3-hour period, seen 100 women pull into that clinic in a 3-hour period on a weekday. Tell me that that is not a genocide. So needless to say, seeing that with my own eyes just made me realize the horrific thing that is going on in our nation, and how, again, it is perfectly legal. We as Christians, we as conservatives, we as Republicans, for the majority, say that we are pro-life, say that we are against abortion, but are we really? Do we really realize how serious, how horrible of a thing is going on in our nation as we speak? Like I said, minutes down the road from us, little babies are being killed. They're being scheduled on an appointment schedule to die in brutal ways. I was born in 1999. And you know, the year I was born, over 900,000 babies were aborted. 900,000 of my future friends, colleagues, peers, neighbors were killed before they even had the chance to take their first breath. And you know, if you are pro-choice and you hear that, you may think to yourself, yeah, they weren't breathing yet, which means they were not alive, they were not people, they were not human beings. Wrong. They were human beings. They were people. They were individuals deserving of basic human rights. From the moment of conception, a unique DNA is formed, making that little baby a unique human being. Unlike any other human being, a life is created at the moment of conception. And so any abortion is murder. You know, sometimes we think in our minds, the farther along a woman is when she gets an abortion, the worse it is. But in reality, any abortion at all is equally as wrong. Because if we believe life begins at conception, we will be against all abortions, whether it's 9 months at 9 months gestation or at 1 day gestation. We will be against abortion. You know, there was a study conducted in 2018 by a man named Stephen Andrew Jacobs. He asked 5,577 biologists when life begins. 5,337, which is 96%, said that life begins at fertilization, which is conception. These were biologists, scientists, probably a lot of them doctors. 96% said life begins at conception. So often, the pro-choice community and the left tells us to follow the science, but yet they are the ones failing to follow the science. When you don't believe that life begins at conception, you have to randomly and arbitrarily decide when you think life begins. Oftentimes, people just pull it out of a hat and say, well, I believe this. There is objective truth, and the objective truth is that life begins at conception. One time I was talking to a pro-choicer, and I asked him, I said, when do you think that life begins? When do you think that baby becomes a human being that's alive? And he responded, I don't really know, but I would say maybe around 5 months. First of all, 5 months, that's extremely far along. And number two, it was so obvious in his answer that he didn't know. He just had to randomly pick a number of months. Because again, when you don't actually follow the science, you have to become the arbiter of right and wrong and truth. And that does not work. You know, I love what Charlie Kirk always said when he was alive. He said, there is a God and you are not him. You know, so often people think that rejecting God sets them free, but it doesn't. It actually puts them in chains because they have to be the arbiter of right and wrong. And that ultimately leads to a place of confusion and chaos. It is so much more freeing to admit there is a God in heaven who created me and who has a certain way he wants me to live, not because he's an oppressive God, but because he loves me. He created me, so he certainly knows what's best for me. And I can follow him and I can trust that he knows what's best. And I can lean on him to make decisions about right and wrong and not have to do all that myself. And you know, people say that conservatives and Christians are not scientific people. You know, that we are dumb people, but we are not. Because science is on the side of God. And science proves that a unique human life is created at the moment of conception. I talked a few moments ago about how many abortions were done the year I was born. But you know, since Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court decision that became the law of the land for so many decades, it legalized abortion on a federal level in 1973. Since that decision, the number of reported abortions were enough to fill, let's say, the Spectrum Center, which is where the Hornets play, the NBA team in Charlotte, and they hold concerts there and stuff, enough to fill the Spectrum Center over 3,000 times, and it holds about 20,000 people. 3,000 times. And that's the ones we know about because so often states do not report abortions. There were probably so many more abortions. Can you imagine that many little children being killed? And again, it being perfectly legal in our country. We rejoiced on the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned. I know I did. I remember exactly where I was when I found out, and I was beyond ecstatic. I was so excited. It was a day we had been praying for so long. But you know what that did was gave the decision of abortion back to the states, which was a good step. But the states now need to take responsibility and ban abortion. Yes, ban abortion 100%. And unfortunately, many states have not. Most states have not. And in fact, many states have expanded abortion. And so the number of abortions has actually increased since the overturn of Roe versus Wade. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still glad it was overturned, but our state legislatures should be ashamed that the number of abortions has increased since that decision. And you know, between 60 and 70% of abortions now are done through the abortion pill. Whereas, you know, 30 years ago, they were surgical abortions, but now there is a pill called the abortion pill that accounts for 60 to 70% of abortions. Sometimes the abortion pill gets confused with Plan B. Now, I just want to say right now, Plan B can also be an abortifacient. What Plan B does in most cases is prevents the newly formed embryo from implanting into the uterus. Plan B is most often called the morning after pill. So, because it's called the morning after pill, it's obvious that it doesn't prevent conception from taking place, but in fact, it prevents that conceived baby from implanting into the uterus. Therefore, it is a very early term abortion in most cases. Some women don't know that. So if you have taken Plan B or you are taking Plan B, please be aware that it is, in most cases, an early term abortion. But the abortion pill is something different from Plan B. The abortion pill is actually taken through 10 weeks gestation. It is a 2-pill process. The first pill is called mifepristone. And like I said, it's taken through 10 weeks gestation. And what that first pill does is literally starve the baby of the hormones that it needs to survive. It is crucial that a mother have enough progesterone for the development of her baby. In fact, most miscarriages take place because a woman is low on progesterone, which unfortunately in our society, because of certain endocrine disruptors and things, it is so common for women to be low on progesterone through no fault of their own and then have miscarriages. But what the abortion pill does is it intentionally starves the baby of the progesterone that it needs to survive, literally starving the baby to death. And then the second pill in the abortion pill process is called misoprostol. And what it does is it puts the mom into early labor. It gets her body, or it gets her uterus to contract, and she will give birth to that dead baby, most likely on the toilet. And so many women that have taken the abortion pill, what they see after the process is complete is so beyond traumatic to them. They see their little baby that, by the way, looks like an actual baby, because it is an actual baby. But the abortion providers will tell you it'll just look like a heavy period or a clump of tissue. And it's literally shaped like a baby in the toilet. And they see that. Some women have been so traumatized by that. And some women have bled uncontrollably and hemorrhaged from the abortion pill. So the FDA says it's safe. And pro-choice politicians say that the abortion pill is safer than Tylenol. But in fact, it has caused women to hemorrhage. It causes women to bleed uncontrollably. It causes them unbelievable pain. There's nothing about that that's safe or normal. So it is so important that our politicians fight for the safety of women. But make no mistake, the baby is always the victim. Yes, it harms women, and we do need to address that. But the baby is always the victim, because someone will always die from the abortion pill. Someone will always die. And it is that baby. And yes, it is true that sometimes women take the abortion pill and they don't fully understand that it's a human life, because unfortunately the abortion industry, and it is an industry, is so good at kind of sterilizing all of the information and language, or holding back information. And so some women really don't quite understand what they're doing, but many women do, and they do it anyway. But no matter what the situation is, the baby is always the victim, and the baby always dies. So yes, women deserve better, but most of all, the babies of America deserve better. Recently, Senator Josh Hawley introduced a bill to ban the abortion pill and revoke its FDA approval. This is incredible. And I just want to say, by the way, Senator Josh Hawley is such a bulldog. He does such amazing work in Washington, D.C. And from what I have seen, he is not afraid to act on what he believes, which is his Christian faith and his conservative values. So many people, when they go to Washington, D.C., they start to censor themselves and be afraid of looking too radical. But Senator Josh Hawley has been such a bulldog for so many years in Washington, D.C., and I am so grateful for that. And he has been such a pro-life advocate. So like I said, he introduced a bill to ban the abortion pill. This is incredible news because, like I said, 60 to 70% of abortions now are done with the abortion pill. And several years ago, a woman had to go to a doctor's office or to an abortion clinic, have an appointment, an ultrasound, and take the abortion pill there at the office. But because of course, COVID, the Biden administration took away those restrictions and regulations, and now women are ordering abortion pills in the mail and receiving them in the mail, taking them at home, taking them in their dorm room, and no one even knows about it. No one knows how far along she is. No one knows if there are complications. And oftentimes she doesn't even get very good instructions on how to do it. She could literally take the abortion pill and hemorrhage in her dorm room and no one know about it. The Biden administration, again, used the excuse of COVID for their own agenda and take away those safety protocols. Now, again, I want to reiterate, the abortion pill is never safe because the baby always dies. But I'm just showing you how the abortion industry and the Biden administration just would do anything to expand abortion. And unfortunately, the safety protocols for the abortion pill, again, safety protocols in quotes, have not been reinstated even under the Trump administration. And there have been a lot of rumors and concerns about why they're doing that and if, the people leading the FDA are really doing what's right in this way and are really pro-life. We can do a whole nother episode about that, but please pray that the Trump administration and those leading the FDA will do the right thing for women, but most importantly for the babies of the United States of America, and that they will actually be 100% pro-life and do everything they can to protect the most innocent and vulnerable among us, the babies in the womb. I said just a few moments ago that sometimes women take the abortion pill and they've been given bad or false information, and so they don't fully understand what they are doing. But some men actually use the abortion pill to be abusive. Sex traffickers and pimps have actually forced women and girls to take the abortion pill. Boyfriends have actually given it to their girlfriends without their consent and without their knowledge. So there are actually women that are being really victimized by the abortion pill by abusive men. So there are so many problems with the abortion pill and with the abortion industry as a whole. So I don't know how anyone who truly understands what the abortion industry is like can actually say they are a feminist or say that they are pro-women or pro-female empowerment. No, the abortion industry does nothing but abuse and exploit women. And more importantly, abuse and exploit unborn babies. This should not be so in a civilized country like the United States of America, this barbaric pagan act of abortion. And again, there may be people under the sound of my voice that maybe you've had an abortion and you need hope and healing. Jesus has forgiveness for you. There is no sin that he cannot forgive and redeem and restore and use as part of your testimony. Or maybe you are a person who is pro-choice, or maybe you're not sure where you stand on this issue. Some of you may have good intentions. Some of you may not fully understand, and you think that being in support of abortion is being pro-woman. This is my plea to you to please do research. Because if you will dig deeper and you will see the dark and sordid history of the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood, all of these things, you will see that there are so many issues. And I pray that you will change your stance because it is not pro-woman. It is not pro-baby. It is not feminism. It's actually the complete opposite. The abortion pill actually has an extremely concerning history as well. And it goes all the way back to Nazi Germany. You know how the left loves to call conservatives and pro-lifers Nazis? Well, I don't like to call people names, but we could actually hurl that name at them because there was a company during World War II, during the Holocaust, called IG Farben Chemical Company. They were the villainous company that actually developed the gas Zyklon B, used in gas chambers to murder millions of Jews and other minority populations during the Holocaust. Well, after World War II and after the Nuremberg trials, IG Farben wasn't destroyed as a company, but rather they were made to subdivide into 3 other companies: Hoechst, Bayer, and BASF. I don't know if I'm saying those right because they're different languages, but you probably recognize some of those, like Bayer, which we could get on a whole other topic about Bayer, why that company even still exists. But anyway, IG Farben Chemical Company was subdivided into those 3 companies. Well, the company called Hoechst became the parent company and major stockholder of Roussel-Uclaf. Roussel-Uclaf is the French company that developed mifepristone, or RU486. If you remember, that is the first pill in the abortion pill process, the one that murders the babies. So you see right there that the company that produced the abortion pill has direct ties to the company that made the gas for gas chambers. Tell me that this is not an agent of death that is being used and weaponized against the American population and the population across the whole world, but specifically unborn babies. This is eugenics. Whereas back then, during World War II and the Holocaust, people were murdered based on their race and religion, or if they had disabilities. Now, people are being killed in this country based on their age and their location and their rate of development. That should not be so. And I believe it is time that we as Christians, we as conservatives, we as Republicans should not just going around playing lip service to the pro-life movement, but that we should actually do something about it. Whether that be to attend prayer walks, whether that be to be a sidewalk counselor, whether that be to use your social media platform or your podcast to talk about abortion, to talk about the pro-life movement. Or whether that is to go to your state legislature, go to Washington, D.C., advocate for life, whatever it be, because there are so many different ways. We need to speak the truth about abortion, and we need to advocate for the lives of the most vulnerable among us. And we also need to start following the science. You know, I pray that one day we as a nation live in a day where abortion is just a distant memory we have of a dark phase of our past, like slavery. We look back at that, at something that happened in our past as a nation, but that is no more. I hope that one day that's how we see abortion, that it one day ends in our country because of godly men and women and conservatives and Republicans stand up and finally put their actions where their mouth is and do something to end abortion. And I pray too that those who consider themselves pro-choice and liberal would finally see these precious babies for the innocent human beings that they are and see that abortion is the taking of an innocent human life. You know, one of my favorite verses, one of my favorite pro-life verses is Proverbs 31:8. It says this: "Open thy mouth for the dumb, and in the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction." That is such a powerful verse. Who in our country is as appointed to destruction as unborn babies when they're literally scheduled to die at what looks like a doctor's office down the road from us? I beg of you, please do something to get involved to end abortion in our nation. And please, most importantly, pray with me for the end of abortion and that these little babies will be allowed to live. Friends, I hope this episode has helped you today. I know we've covered some heavy things, but I believe that if we approach this topic in truth, it will affect change. It will affect positive change in our hearts and in the world around us. Thank you so much for listening today. Please share this episode with a friend or a family member that you think needs to hear this, and also subscribe on the platform of your choice. If you feel so led, please also leave a rating and review to encourage other people to listen. Thank you so much for listening today. Until next time, this is Amelia Proclaims Liberty.